Hi everyone, and welcome to another edition of This Week in Stupid Trans News. There's a few topics I'd like to discuss today, but first I want to address something just a little bit different. So last Friday I attended Sargon of Akkad and Count Dankula's talk at the David Game College in the City of London. Despite having to relocate after pressure from Antifa forced the previous venue to cancel, the event ran smoothly and I still have a little bit of a hangover from that night. As you'd expect, left-wing critics jumped at the chance to slam it, but rather than addressing what was discussed, instead they attacked the attendees, tweeting things like "Where are the women?" and pointing out non-white people in the audience, otherwise labelling it as an event for incels. It doesn't make any difference as to who made up the audience, and whilst I shouldn't have to point this out, there were indeed many women and people of colour who came along and had a great time. I'm unaware of whether there were any non-binary people there. I'm sure they would have made themselves known if there were, but this tranny in attendance didn't feel intimidated by anyone there. But this habit of pointing out so-called minorities at events where race and gender don't matter is quite uncomfortable. There is a habit some on the left seem to have, as though they believe all good women and people of colour must subscribe to their viewpoint and not form views of their own. They are the ones who are obsessed with race and gender, and it's almost reminiscent of the alt-right. When you're targeting people in this way, singling them out for not being white or men, it comes across as sinister, and it puts off others from voicing views for fear of being attacked, both online and in person, which I suppose is their aim, but it's disgraceful nonetheless, and I did feel like I needed to call this out. But anyway, time to lower the tone a little with my first strange story. Non-binary activist quits Fantastic Beasts. Jamie Windust, a non-binary model and activist, managed to secure a part as an extra in the latest Harry Potter spin-off, Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald. But they soon quit because of bigotry. I'd like to say it's surprising to hear of bigotry claims levelled against the wizarding world, although J.K. Rowling is certainly no stranger to being told she's problematic. But what happened that was so awful to force this poor NB to quit their role? I worked as an extra on this film, and it was one of the worst jobs I've ever done, Windust said. Literally ever. Misogyny, homophobia, transphobia everywhere, plus 16-hour days in minus temperatures. Atrocious. Wow. This does sound awful, guys. I mean, long hours are generally expected when working in film and television, especially for a project as high profile as Fantastic Beasts, so maybe Windust could have been a bit more prepared. But misogyny, homophobia and transphobia, literally everywhere? Christ, this does sound like a nightmare. Well, let's see Windust expose the Potterverse for the vile, hate-filled abuse they had to encounter. Not only were the staff literally all white, Not only were the staff literally all white, this is the only mention of race Windust brings up, that people on set were white. Already that's a crime to woke leftists, but I'm just not sure what that really brings to the table here. The place you were hired wasn't intersectional enough? If you want to claim there's some racial discrimination going on, maybe do some digging. Otherwise it just looks like a woke whinge. Anyway, not only were the staff literally all white, but it was a diverse cast of extras that were definitely not all cis. You're assuming their gender there. But despite this, for the whole duration of the filming process, we were cast and sectioned into male and female groups. Separating males and females? Backwards barbarism. I understand these events are long days and long hours, but to work from 4 AM to 6 PM for weeks solid was inevitably going to be stressful, and with the lack of acknowledgement for my gender identity to also be a factor here, I obviously wasn't excited to work. Most places aren't going to care about whether you're non-binary. You should try leaving your queer bubble a bit more often. This isn't necessarily the organisers' fault, but the other extras were incredibly misogynistic, homophobic and transphobic to the members of the cast, who were visibly diverse, and due to the fact I was segregated into the male group, I heard a lot of this vile rhetoric sometimes championed and goaded by members of staff, like ogling women, discussing having sex with other cast members, but also the homophobia towards other extras all went unchallenged and allowed to happen. So let's highlight here. The misogyny was men talking between themselves about which women they found attractive. And the homophobia was... what exactly? No examples are given. And I'm still waiting for the examples of transphobia, unless you count not giving Windust their own special category for having an ultra-rare gender identity, which I certainly do not. At the time, Windows says they were with an incredibly unprofessional agency, adding, "I have now realised they were wrong to work with as they asked me from day one if I would choose a gender to be affiliated with in their books, so I didn't have to go in their special section." Windows is now with Crumb Agency. They describe Crumb as an agency who set up their own bloody non-binary board because of my beauty. So, one agency was unprofessional for telling Windows to choose a gender, otherwise they'd be put in a special section. Yet the other is much better because they set up a special section just for Windows. Okay. Windows goes on to moan about the long working hours on set. I know people who work in film and TV. Long days are very common. It's something you just need to learn to deal with. Nothing but entitled whinging. But then they criticise the casting call. Just because the language that they were using, now that I look back on it, was quite alarming. They were basically asking for supernatural, weird-looking, androgynous people, which I understand I do have that look. I think because I was so new to the industry and because I had just started, I didn't want to look like I was ungrateful. Oh, don't put yourself down like that. I'm sure you're not weird looking. So you fit the look they're wanting, yet moan about going for it anyway. As cringeworthy as this story is, I do have to say it's not so newsworthy. It's an entitled millennial whinging about having to work a long day, not having their own magical section for being non-binary, and complaining about misogyny, homophobia and transphobia by only giving scant examples of the former and nothing for the latter. So why am I covering this? Well, because there are 3 other outlets that ran with the story, not just Gay Star News, but Out Magazine and Pink News amongst many others. They are the ones claiming this is an exposure of a traumatising experience for an innocent NB and highlights the struggles of queers in Hollywood. After all, Windows criticises even being given jobs by the film industry for being queer. And therein lies the problem. It's considered good journalism to take an entitled millennial's hurt feelings as fact. Stories like this seek to validate hurt feels as reals, as though there's no point in reaching out because the whole world is misogynistic, homophobic, transphobic, etc, etc, etc. And Windows is looking to raise their profile in any way possible, including playing the victim, like in June of this year when they cried to the gay press because of a Sainsbury's employee who called them a man. Anecdotes should not be played off as facts, and this really should not be getting the kind of traction that it is. But let's now turn to more serious news. But before I do so, let's take a quick look back to one of my videos from a few months ago. I understand there are many who are openly supporting the removal of Alex Jones from Facebook, YouTube and so on, particularly from the gender critical movement. But I want to end this video by saying that the social media titans are quickly adopting the talking points of the trans activists along with other far left movements. One day soon, you'll find yourselves being removed from Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, the internet for speaking out against the rising tide. Do not champion the silencing of voices just because you disagree with them. One day, this will affect you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and bees, I guess, the day has come, as Twitter has announced that misgendering trans people can now result in a ban. That's right, according to Twitter's own rules, targeted misgendering or dead naming of transgender individuals is considered harassment. On the face of it, this seems almost understandable. Targeted abuse against individuals is something many websites ban outright. So how does this work in practice? Well, let's just ask Megan Murphy, who was banned last week for critiquing trans activists. Or how about my friend Jessica Jane, a trans woman who was recently banned for referring to herself as male. Yes, a trans woman referring to herself as male is considered transphobia. See, both of these instances weren't targeted harassment. They were discussions which trans activists just found offensive, and so Twitter swung their ban hammer in order to appease the masses. These will not be the only examples in the coming weeks and months. I've already seen examples of radical trans activists gloating about getting people banned and encouraging others to join in as well. If the intention is to stop harassment of trans people, whilst that's certainly admirable, we can already see that it's having the opposite effect. I'll be honest, I'm generally not one for dead naming or using so-called wrong pronouns. Provided someone has put in at least some effort into their transition, I'm going to show a little respect. It doesn't matter whether I agree with their politics or not. You're not going to catch me calling Lily Madigan a man, despite how strongly I disagree with her. I just ask for a little effort, that's all. But I accept this is purely on me. I wouldn't want to be forced to do this, just as I wouldn't want someone to be coerced to refer to me with female pronouns. And this is going to mean that, according to Twitter, you must refer to the likes of Danielle Moscato and Karen White as women, despite Moscato doing less than the bare minimum in their transition and White being a predatory rapist. And what about made-up pronouns? If someone's pronouns are sie or schlim, do we have to use them? This might sound ludicrous, but remember, neopronouns are considered an actual thing by the trans community, and Twitter hasn't produced a list of pronouns they actually recognise. This new rule is actively comparing the use of wrong pronouns with slurs and language encouraging violence. Having the wrong pronouns isn't nice, I can personally attest to that. But to compare it to a slur, it's just not on the same level. But this is what happens when you allow social media giants to assume the mantle of morality arbiters. You may have cheered on as Silicon Valley removed the likes of Alex Jones and Milo Yiannopoulos from their sites because you disagree with what they said. And now, these same sites are going to take action against you because they consider what you say to be hate speech. It doesn't matter what the context is. All that matters is someone, somewhere is upset. This should not come as a surprise to anyone. When you make it clear some voices must be silenced for being problematic, others will follow suit because they will find what you say to be problematic as well. Graham Linehan championed Twitter for showing Alex Jones the door, but now he cares about free speech once he finds his own views in the firing line. This is because of people like him, and don't pretend to care about free speech when you only care about your own voice. I'm a transsexual and I am against removing people from social media for voicing opinions I disagree with. I've even put my neck out in the past to show this. It shouldn't take the removal of your views to make you realise just how important freedom of speech really is. But what are your thoughts on the stories that I've covered today? Is there any which you feel as though I've missed out? I am aware of a school in Brighton which claims to have more than 40 gender diverse children there. This is something I'm going to be covering in a later video because this needs a little bit more time to properly address. But please let me know in the comments about any of your thoughts. Thank you all for watching and I will see you all next time.